As they said, my name is Crystal Peterson. I'm coming to you from Virginia in the United States, and I work with a company named Neustar. Neustar has been in the domain name business for the past 16 years. They were one of the companies that in the first round of new GTLDs back in 2000 and 2001 had entered the market then with the .biz domain name. And we'll get a little bit more into that a little bit later. But what I wanted to talk to you about was domain names, and specifically about looking at the history of domain names and where they came from. Also looking at kind of what's going on today with the new GTLD space. And then how can we and your customers use domain names, and what are some of the opportunities that you as web developers and business owners can look to in utilizing domain names as different channels, and kind of where we see the business going, because to us it's not all about .com. If I had my way, it wouldn't be about .com at all, although we are very thankful that .com grew to where it is today. We don't think that's the end-all of the industry. So before I get into it, I just wanted to give a little bit more detail about Neustar. Neustar, as I said, has been in the domain registry space for the past 16 years, but has a big history in security services and marketing services and data analytics, and serves customers all around the world with its products and software. So we have about 1,600 employees worldwide. We have about 14,000 customers, and there's about 1.2 billion in revenue that generates year over year. So it's a pretty big company. The registry business is about 100 people, and we have offices in the United States, in Colombia, in Europe, here in India, in China, and in Australia, and we serve over 300 registry operators and domain name customers that then serve their customers. So some of the registry services customers that we have, you can see up on the screen, from our own TLDs that we run end-to-end, like .biz and .co and .nyc, to other providers that we provide services for, especially in the new GTLD space, like .club, .buzz, .uno, and some other ones. Also some brand clients. We have the MLB, the Major League Baseball. We have Citibank, .city, and other customers like that have their brand TLDs that they got just in this past round. And then we also serve a lot of corporate clients, as I said, the brand customers from the registry business, but also for some of our security services and marketing services around the world. So we are very proud of our partners, Reseller Club being one of those as well, and very happy to be here with them. But enough about me. I really wanted to talk to you today again about a little bit of the history of where domain names have come from. So we're going to jump back about 30 years. I know that the IP space and the technology space is older than that, but we're going to kind of fast forward through some of that and jump back to about 1985, and when domain names were just starting out and getting going. So in what we call the first GTLD round versus the new GTLD round in 1985. And for us, we feel that the domain name system and domain names, it all starts with that name. You have websites, you can build websites on IP addresses, but nobody remembers those IP addresses. They don't remember those numbers. They remember Coca-Cola.com, or they remember Tata.com, or things of that nature, or they remember redcross.org. So we believe it all starts with that domain name, and it's very important for customers to have that domain name and not piggyback off of other domain names like Facebook.com, business pages, and things like that. We think everybody should have their own. But if we look back in history, at the first GTLD round in 1985, Symbolics.com was the first domain name that was ever registered, July of 1985. MITRE.org was registered in 1985, and that's the first .org domain name, and then Nordu.net was also registered in 1985, and that was the first .net domain name. So from there, the domain name space took off. What's really interesting is Symbolics.com was a company that used their name for over 25 years, and now, because of the history of the domain, you can go to that website, and it's a little bit of the history of the internet. So they've kind of turned it into a museum, per se, about some of the facts and figures that have happened on the internet. So it's really interesting. I encourage you to check it out. Moving through, one of the things that was interesting is the first domain registrations, you had to fill out an application, you had to be approved to get that domain name, but the domain names were free. So any domain name that was awarded was free to that user. And there were many way back in the day that have made some of their money from that because they got it for free and were able to sell it later for millions. So that's a good turnaround. But in 1995, 10 years after domain names came about, they were no longer free. So Network Solutions at the time, who was both the registry for .com and the registrar, before VeriSign came about, put together a registration package, and you could get a .com domain name for 2 years for $100, and you had to buy it for 2 years, and it was $100. So, in 1995, if some of you remember back, that's when a lot of content started picking up. That's when a lot of people really started paying attention to this online thing and kind of jumping online. So there's a lot of companies that were jumping online and were happily handing over their $100 for a .com domain. You still had to be approved for a domain name. So .com meant commercial. So most commercial entities went towards .com. .org meant organization or anything other than commercial, and .net meant networks and internal. So from there, it was kind of how people resonated, and most commercial companies were jumping online. Therefore, most of what was being registered were .coms. And then you have 1998. The birth of ICANN, the Internet Corporation of Assigned Names and Numbers, which actually just had their latest meeting in Abu Dhabi earlier this week. They came about to become a bottoms-up policy body for the domain name space. You had both the generic .com, .net, .orgs of the world, but you also had all of the country codes, .in, .cn, .de, .uk, all of those had been being registered and being used by their countries or their sovereign entities since 1991. And so ICANN became a space where a lot of policy was put together, but it wanted to not be a top-down, it wanted to be a bottom-up approach. Varying degrees of success depending on who you talk to, but it is still very much that way. So many times policy takes a really long time because there's many, many hands that are trying to make the decisions. But then comes 2000, and as I had mentioned before, Neustar entered the game during this time. You'd also had the split of Network Solutions into Network Solutions, the registrar, and VeriSign, the registry. And VeriSign ran ComNet and org at this time. And then also you have some new players because they opened the GTLD space and they said, we don't necessarily think that .com, .net, and .org are the only places where people can have their businesses and have their presence online. So we want to get applications for new players. And so you had the birth of .biz, .info, .mobi came in this time period, although it was a few years later, .name, .asia. you had many of these GTLDs that came about as what we call the first new GTLD round in 2000 and 2001. And from there, we also had another phenomenon happen. In 2007, the domain name vacationrentals.com was sold for $35 million, which in 2007 is a lot of money. In 2017, it's a lot of money. But this had never happened before. So you have these names that in 1985, up through 1995 were free. In 1995, you could probably get them for $100 or more. As you start getting into 2000, you have the GoDaddies of the world that are starting. You have DirectEye that is starting, and so domain names started to become more reasonably priced, if you will. And here you have vacation rentals sell for $35 million. Ben Sharples bought it, and he did not want his competitor Expedia to have it, and so he felt that $35 million was a steal in order to keep it out of his competitor's hands. And this is kind of where a lot of the premium names started coming from. So as I'd mentioned before, some of those individuals that had gotten domain names for free and started selling them for millions of dollars. This is kind of what was happening. We had a few years later, Sex.com sold for $13 million, and at that time it was thought, wow, that was such a huge sale, and it was, but when you have a $35 million sale as well, you really want to look at what we call that premium space, and are people willing to pay a little bit more, and are domain names worth a little bit more than that $999 price tag or 999 rupee price tag that is on them? Even today, looking at different domain names, and really putting some of the value on the names, there is, from your perspective as business owners, there's revenue in there, but also from customers' perspective, there is value in that, and it is not just any dot at the end of the name will do, but there are some dots that could be worth more than other dots at the end of the name and names. And then in 2013, Who API put out a report that said that all of the 4-letter combinations, 3- and 4-letter combinations of .com domain names had been registered. So that if you were going to pick up one, you were going to be doing so on the secondary market, or it had already had traffic on it. And looking at this was kind of the very beginning precursors of the second new GTLD round. And what could people do? Did they have to settle for buying a domain name that had already been used, or were there other options other than ComNet, Org, Biz, Info, or their country code TLD, which were seemingly running out of space. Now we all know the space is infinite and there are other options, but seemingly running out of space, especially when in .com all of the 4 letters are gone. One of note, also in 2013, the company I was working for at the time, which is the .co Internet, which runs the .co domain name, we put out a study, and one of the things that we found was that 57% of small business owners thought that finding a name for their website or blog or business was harder than naming their baby. And naming your baby is very hard. You want to get the right name. You want to make sure that it has good history. It's going to go on and stuff like that. And they thought that naming their website was even harder than that. So looking at the actual domain name options out there, what can we do? And are we settled on just these few options, or is there an opportunity for more? ICANN and the community thought that there was an opportunity for more. And they put out an application period for new GTLDs, and this is where you had the .clubs of the world, the .buzz, all start to come about and to be options for for domain names and for customers. Again, too, this is where .me and .co also were able to revitalize themselves to be like a new GTLD, even though it had the history of a legacy or an older TLD, to be able to kind of bring it to the fore for customers. And we have a small video here to tell you about the Dot's friends.
The Dot is making new friends, more than 1,300 of them, and they're going to change the internet like never before.
The old friends, like org, net, and com, as well as the many two-letter friends from around the world, will continue to sit by the side of the Dot.
But these new friends promise to show us new things, take us to new places, and open new paths to innovation.
Some are brands, names you already know, who are designing new ways to better serve your online needs.
Some are generics, everyday words that just might attract your personal or professional online interests.
Still others are cities and towns, offering an online home for you or your business.
And for the first time, Dot names in many more languages and characters, giving voice to 1 billion more internet users.
Yes, thanks to the Dot's many new friends, the internet is changing.
Thank you. So, here we have 2014, there were over 19,000 applications for new GTLDs. Actually, that was 2013 and 2014. And then since that time, so in the past 3 years, we've had over 1,000, actually I believe it's over 1,500 new domain names launched. That is a lot of domain names in a small time period. So now, what do we do? How do you help your customers really find that ideal domain name or ideal domain names? Maybe it's a group of domain names where one used to be able to fit before. I wouldn't hesitate to say maybe it is, with a couple, but since that time, we've, as of March of this year, we had 329 million domain names around the world. 28 million of those were from the new GTLDs that had launched only within the past 3 years. So, things are rapidly growing. Things are really, trying to get into the hands of users. And so, being able to talk to you guys is, very important to us because, you guys talk directly to the customers and to people that are building websites, and, to be able to offer them solutions that are different, maybe different from what they had 5 years ago, but are just as viable and just as good. And then we also had a 6.8% increase over Q4 of 2015 into 2017. So that's about a 3%, almost 4% increase per year in domains. Most of that in new GTLDs. And I wanted to just bring to an attention a statement that Patrick Byrne, who is the CEO of Overstock.com, said that the new era of the internet, short and memorable web addresses are crucial for capturing the attention of mobile and socially connected internet users. So some of those really long domain names that nobody can remember, while they may be utilized and they may be redirected to, having a short and memorable domain and website name to be able to get to that content has become very important, especially when people are typing on mobile, so they don't want to type a super long domain name. They don't really remember that super long domain name. So what can we do in order to help those customers really get their customers to the content that they want? And so that takes us into the next section where many times we hear customers say, oh, I want a .com domain, they don't say domain name, I want a .com, how can you help me get a .com? Well, really, are they looking for that .com, or are they using .com as a generic term to mean website? And, helping the customers really kind of understand that what you want is a website and not necessarily a .com. You might be building on a .org, or you might be building on a .biz, or you might be building on a .club, depending on the website that you want. And kind of really looking at just a couple of examples of that brand name versus generic, because we all get into it. We'll use that brand as the generic term when really we kind of want to stay around what that generic term is. For example, Kleenex. I don't know if that's a big brand here, but it's facial tissues. Back at home in the States, we always say, oh, I need a Kleenex in order to blow your nose or to wipe up something. Well, really what we wanted was a facial tissue instead of a Kleenex. But, you know, it's kind of resonated because they were one of the first to market when there's many other brands as well. Or Band-Aid. Band-Aids are adhesive bandages, but who says I need an adhesive bandage? At least in the States we don't. We just say I need a Band-Aid. So, you know, trying to kind of get out of that, and Band-Aid loves it, but Curad, who also makes adhesive bandages, does not. So it's one of the things that, you know, within that market, you know, how can we help customers understand what they really want versus just saying the brand name. Some other examples are a Seeing Eye Dog, that is a brand, versus the actual generic term. Bubble Wrap, which we use to wrap whatever, is a brand name versus a generic term. And then .com. So .com has started to become that generic term for website, but we really want to help users understand that really what you want is a website, and it might not have a .com address. It might have something else that is just as good and potentially even better, depending on the circumstances for what you want. And there's lots of options out there. There's still legacy options that have had time in the market. There are some new options that maybe don't have as much time in the market, but are still just as viable and still just as safe. But, you know, there are a lot of options out there. So helping customers kind of realize, you know, what those options are very important. And then obviously through Reseller Club, you have the ability to register those options for your customers. And one of the ways that we can look at registration as well as kind of, you know, going forward where one domain name might have sufficed before, how can we use domain names as a channel? So everybody back in the 80s may have known Slash, the guitar player. Well, we have a campaign where we call it Trash the Slash. And we're not meaning the guitar player. We are actually meaning the slash in website names. So you have www.example.com/en/whatever, and you have this long name with all the slashes, right? So how can we get rid of that slash and really use domain names as those channels? So you have the different options and opportunities to have you know, domain names. For example, our email address, Newstar, registered and applied for its own brand name, .newstar, in the new GTLD round. So all of our email addresses have been switched over to team.newstar. All of our support email addresses are at support.newstar. Whereas before we were newstar.biz for everything, we now have team.newstar for our email. We have support.newstar. Registry.newstar is our registry website address versus newstar.biz/en/registry. It is just registry.newstar. So some opportunities to be able to use domain names as those channels. And you know, looking at that, with over 1,000 extensions launched, there are opportunities to help drive traffic through using those domain names as marketing opportunities. You know, looking at how to not only put that up on a billboard, but you know, you can gain website analytics and analytics from the traffic that's driven to different websites as well. And then the fact that they are short and memorable really helps with customers, with your customers that are looking to drive traffic to their websites to be able to get to that content. For example, Nike has a website that is nike.com/US/en_US/SL/store-locator. who's going to remember all of that? You might be able to obviously remember Nike.com, and you go to Nike.com, but many times then you have abandoned websites, you have abandoned traffic because it wasn't the exact content you wanted to get to. So now Nike has several opportunities. They can use Nike.store or Nike.shop, and that can be on their billboards. It might still redirect to the content that is at that long URL, but they can use that on their billboards. Or for Nike being a large brand, Nike might have gotten their own brand, so they might have store.nike. Many different opportunities, but all just as memorable and more memorable than the domain name that where the store actually lives. So it can be used as a marketing channel. So I had another example in here as well. So if you look at Your Business, which is a made-up a made-up site, let's say that business has been in business for about 10 years, and they have a growing customer base. They have in several different cities. They're looking to grow. They also have some media and some social engagement that they want to be able to do to gain more customers. So is a domain name strategy that they could use for that? Not only the content, but also a domain name strategy. So this is a potential. Obviously, this is a lot of domain names, and looking at customers, maybe having them use 2 or 3. But if you have yourbusiness.com is the main website, and that's where the majority of the content lives. But then you have yourbusiness.co, which holds their global content, and the fact that they're in many different countries. They have business in the US and Germany and in England. So they have a .us, a .de, and a .co.uk. And then they're looking to be able to grow some of their social engagement, and so they wanted to have a yourbusiness.club because they were building a frequent buyer area, and so they're building that club space. They wanted to be able to talk about all of their efforts that they're doing in nonprofits and in charity, and so they have yourbusiness.org. And then they also wanted to have a hub for all of their media, be it press releases or videos or anything like that. So they have yb.media. And there they have their blog on yourbusiness.blog, and then they have all of their video content on yourbusiness.tube. So that's kind of a blown out example, but it shows that you can use different domain names for a lot of these different areas. Instead of the slash, you can use domain names. And this slide you can't see too well, but it's basically how can we link all of the different opportunities that we have out there that have been growing, that have been evolving over the past few years, and really help customers do what they want to do, which is drive traffic to their websites to be able to grow revenue, grow customers, and thrive as well with the opportunities that are out there. Some resources for you to keep up to date with this space. One is the Universal Acceptance Group. They are at usag.tech. Another is the Domain Name Association, and they're at thedna.org. Neustar is a member of that organization. And then we also have ICANN, which I had talked about earlier, and they're at icann.org. They have a lot of resources on domain names and the new GTLD space and what's happening in the industry right now. And I wanted to touch on just briefly, because as we're using domain names as marketing channels, and again, as I mentioned, your customers, as you know, are really looking for traffic and for growth in their businesses. So it's really about getting found in today's crowded landscape with so many different opportunities to get content in front of people's eyes. What are some ways to help do that? Because 85% of consumers search for local business online. That's probably larger now. That was a 2014 study. And that can be even larger. So if they're searching online, we want to make sure that they remember that web address that they are searching. And we want to make sure that they remember the web address to the exact content that they are searching, because as we learned in the last presentation, most everyone expects to be able to get to that content within 3 seconds on a page, right? So let's say your page loads, it loads within 2.5 seconds, so it was faster, but it wasn't the content that they wanted. They're still going to go away. Whereas if you can get them through a domain name to that exact content, they can now start to engage. So, you know, looking at the SEO and looking at, you know, that content, part of that SEO strategy, not the only part, but part of that SEO strategy can be the domain names themselves. So you want to make sure to have a good domain name that you're using, because that can be part of your SEO strategy with your customers to make sure that that content is really being found online. And finally, domain names are not a fad. Many people have been talking about, will domain names go away with the increase of apps, with the increase of the smartphones and all of that? You know, if people just have an app to press, are they really going to remember a domain name out there? And we think that they are, because again, you still have marketing billboards, you still have ways for people to get to content. That might evolve over time, but we believe that domain names will still be around and will still be utilized and need to be utilized, you know, in order to get to certain content. So, you know, other fads that were out there, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Laserdisc players. They look like big vinyl records, but they were like CDs. So Laserdiscs were around for a really flash in the pan, a big fad, but you know, we think domain names are longer than a fad. So we've got a lot to learn. We've only had a 30-year history. We feel we're just scratching the surface. So over 30, you know, from 30 years ago to today, we've had over 1,500 domain names launched. We've had the influx of premium names and really valuing domain names so that it's not a one-size-fits-all. And so we're looking at, you know, where can we go next? But ultimately, we believe that domain names really are where people will resonate. Yes, you can have the Facebook business pages, and you can have your Yelp pages and your Yext pages and all of that, but really what that all comes down to is it still needs to come down to a presence online, and where is that going to live? So I have one last video for you guys. This is from Donuts, who in this last round has launched a lot of new domain names like .guru and .accountant and about 300 other ones that I can't remember right now. But they put together a good video about kind of the value of new domain names. So finally, last thought, you know, as you're helping your customers, I like to say, don't stick your head in the sand. So, you know, whether you go after all of the new domain names or you look to incorporate just a few of them, really get out there and learn a little bit more about them, because I think your customers will really appreciate and value your services for being able to help them find some of those new opportunities as well. So with that, I am done. Thank you very much.